Now join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right. Good evening, everyone. How are you all doing on this fine day? It's always the masks kind of even mask us more, but how can I say this? There's always this like a dulling is the word I'm like sitting with, that like arises a lot in people when they come to places like this. What I mean by that is people kind of like, they like just seem to settle into their stuff. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that that's bad or good or right or wrong, but there's this heaviness that when people sit in places like this, it's just right there with you. And I think it's important to recognize that and see it, but then also figure out how to kind of work through that a little bit. And one of the best ways, I think, is with laughter and humor. Actually, a couple things which have absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now, but I just wanted to open this and put the fans on. So who laughed today? What made you laugh?
I was watching some comedy on my phone.
There you go. Comedy on your phone. What else? What made you laugh? My dog. Your dog. Dogs are great. Oh my God. I'll come back to the dog thing. Remind me. What else? Who laughed today? What made you laugh? You? Yourself?
Yeah.
Just laughing at yourself all day long. That's important too. Can you laugh at yourself?
Of course.
Sorry. Go ahead. What made you laugh?
Just joking around with patients.
Joking around with patients? Yeah. What else? Who laughed? Go ahead. Just shout them out.
Squirrel nutkin.
Say again?
Squirrel nutkin.
Couldn't do that a third time. Hang on. Sorry. All I heard was squirrel.
Squirrel nutkin. It's kind of a rascal squirrel from Beatrix Potter stories.
Huh? Temple has a squirrel.
Okay.
We have a resident squirrel out front. What else? Who laughed today and why? Did either of you laugh today? Figured out. The dogs are great, right? What if I just led class back here? Then that would like kind of defeat the purpose of lying out in the back, huh? And all the people in front are like, oh man. What else? Who laughed today? Yeah? What made you laugh?
I laugh every day for
You?
a minute.
Laugh every day for a minute?
I force myself, yeah.
Have you ever done laughter
1 minute.
yoga?
Yeah, well, I do it myself.
Yeah.
My kids, 1 minute.
I did it once. It drove me. I didn't like it.
It's very, very, yeah, it's just, it's long. A minute is very long.
It is. Yes.
Just realized it.
Have you like taken laughter yoga classes?
Yeah,
Is it got Michael still do it? Is that his name?
it was in Los Angeles.
Okay.
I'm here.
Years ago, I did conferencing somewhere, and they invited me to meditation, and there was also a laughter yoga session. And, so I participated in what was going on, and I really tried to like it or get it. I just couldn't. Anyone here done laughter yoga or anything like that? So it's like they just tell you to laugh. And at first, everyone's just kind of doing like fake laughs. And then like somebody does kind of a little bit of real laugh, and then somebody like snorts or something like that. And then there's another laugh. And then it goes from like all these initial fake laughs. And then everybody's like laughing hysterically. But at that point where I was with my life and things like that, it didn't work for me. It was funny, but I think I found myself laughing more at them than with them, so there I am to lead meditation, and I'm taking part in a laughter yoga, and I was actually judging and being annoyed by the people laughing. And I was like, Jeff, you got a lot of work to do, man. But that's where I was. So anyone else want to share how they laughed today? Yeah.
We have some parrots that we've rescued from the bone flocks, and one of them is a real character.
Nice. That's great. Animals are phenomenal. So the dog story. A couple years back, probably about 4 years ago, it was here. And it was this person, they were sitting like right there in that area. It was their first time here. And like you could just see like the misery in this person. No offense to any of you who are miserable right now and here for the first time. That's kind of how we all start out typically. But they were just like soaking in it. And he raised his hand and he started telling his story about how when he comes home from work, his dog is always just so excited to see him. And so he's telling the story, and then he goes on to say, he was talking about his relationship and his wife, and he said, I just want to get to the place where when I come home, my wife is as excited to see me as my dog is. And everybody just kind of laughed. And I just looked at him and I said, I hate to break it to you, but I don't know that that's ever going to happen, And I said it, and as I said it, I realized oh, that was probably not the best thing to say, because you could have either really pissed him off or he could have seen the humor in it. Fortunately, in that moment, he broke out into laughter and it was okay. But there's definitely been moments for me where I sit up here and I've said things, and then I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Especially when you sit up here, because people look at you and think that you're supposed to know stuff, Any of you ever said anything you shouldn't have said? So why are the people that lead this stuff supposed to be like exempt from that list, Aren't we allowed to say things that we shouldn't say? You have great experience with a great master who said and did things that they probably shouldn't have said and done, right? And that can really mess your psyche a little bit, Yeah, but back to laughter. So laughter, we'll change that topic, right? Laughter is important. And wherever you find it throughout your day, find it, Joy in Buddhist practice is really important. And for me, my approach always with Buddhism is, okay, let's focus on the suffering. Let's figure out why we're suffering. And then let's do things to transform that suffering so we suffer less. That's just always been what I learned through Buddhist teachings and how I approach it. But every so often, a night like tonight where I just sat down and I felt like there was just this like heaviness in the room, to remind ourselves that there's a lot to be joyful with and about. There's lots of areas and things and people and places in our life we can find joy and laughter and excitement, whatever that means to you. So if you go through your day and you're not laughing much, then explore how in my day can I find more joy. Because if you have more joy, you have less what?
Suffering.
There we go. Wasn't a trick question. Misery and suffering. Thank you. If we have more joy, we have less misery and less suffering. So it is a wonderful approach to figure out how to suffer less, is do things that bring you joy. And, whether it's through, if your work is very taxing and stressful and hectic and chaotic and you can't always find tremendous joy every moment there, then try to find hobbies and other things in your life to create a sense of joy. Super, super important. So more joy is less suffering and less misery. So, all right, with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start a meditation. Good to see you all online as well, all our YouTube followers, growing by leaps and bounds. So thanks for being here. Feel free to chime in, say hello. If you have questions, you can type them in there as well when we get to that part. So we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long, it's not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? You're doing it right or wrong. We're just going to sit and breathe. All right? If you are sitting for the first time, you're not trying to shut off your mind or go blank or think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I will say things periodically to bring you back to the present moment. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, sliding to the front third often helps, or on a bench or chair, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, had nothing to do with anything I said, nothing to do with how you sit, Hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sound around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice, not necessarily fun, not an escape, as often people think it is. Early on with practice, we recognize that our lives are crazy, busy, hectic. And so we turn to meditation, Buddhist practice to help with all of that. And if we work on it, it does help. And then we begin to recognize that we want to bring this practice into our already existing lives. Not necessarily running from the life we have to this stuff, but bringing this stuff into the life we have. And that's when things in your life begin to really change. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. It's a challenge. You know, we were having challenges and difficulties and struggles 2.5 to 3 years ago, before a pandemic hit. Then pandemic hit and life got even crazier. And then shootings occur and children and adults die and life gets even crazier. I started Saturday morning, which was my intention not to do it tonight, but I started Saturday morning and I sat down and I think the first 5 things I said were, what a mess. I just repeated what a mess like 5 times. I didn't know what else to say. That's just what I was sitting with at that moment. But within the mess, and that's why for me, at least tonight, I just thought it was important to recognize that, yes, there's so much chaos going on right now. It's always been there. It's always going to be there. It will change. That doesn't minimize anything that's gone on. It just means that the chaos and the anger and the hatred and the violence and everything that's in the world didn't just start. And it's not ending anytime soon. So with that, the practice is to begin to recognize, okay, this is the world we live in. How and where can I find joy in my life? Because if I don't, things can get really bad. And that takes a little bit of effort. I come across this relatively often where a lot of people, when there's such heavy situations occurring, where often people ask questions around this idea of them almost feeling guilty for being happy or joyful when there's so much tragedy and suffering going on. And, it's come up recently with a few people that have shared a few things. And it's okay to enjoy your life, to be pleasant, to be joyful, to be happy. That doesn't mean that you're ignoring the world that might not be that way right now. But if you can keep yourself happy and pleasant and joyful, then you can share that. You can figure out ways to make positive change in the community and the world around us. But if all we carry in our hearts is anger and frustration, then that's what we're going to share. So it's easy to get kind of sucked into all the negativity and the pain because it's there, it's real. And I'm not talking about in Buddhist practice, spiritual practice, they call it spiritual bypassing, where you kind of just pretend that you're on this like spiritual plane and above all the other stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being joyful in your life, and recognizing the pain and suffering that occurs, and being with it all together. Super important. So with that, I'll pause. And for me, as always, I really prefer just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll address any questions you may have. There's a question here from Cynthia. I don't know if there's a question or a thought, comment, both. Hi, Cynthia. I feel like the hungry ghost, in quotes. I crave is in caps, peace on earth. I crave, which is in caps, COVID to be over. I crave, which is in caps, life to be back to some semblance of normalcy. And I'm tired. And then I've actually never seen that emoji before. Doing classes with computers in front of me is so fun these days. It actually took me a long time to recognize that when I'm looking at this, the beauty of it is I can also see the Kuan Yin statue. For the longest time, I was like, I don't want to look, like there I am just sitting there and I'm like staring at myself. And then I realized like, wow, I can look at the shrine just like everybody else. But it was like months before I finally realized that. It's a emoji smiley face with like a crinkled mouth. I didn't want you all to be left out of the emojis. Yeah, I hear you, Cynthia. The word crave, for those who don't know, the Buddha taught that craving is the cause of suffering, that we suffer because we crave and desire. But there's also healthy cravings. Without the craving to suffer less, without the craving to end suffering, none of us would be here. The Buddha never would have awakened if he didn't have that desire to crave to end suffering. So there are healthy cravings and healthy desires. So I just want to kind of point that out first. Peace on earth. For me, this teaching comes from everywhere, but the first place that peace must exist is within us. The earth is a pretty big place. It's a big place. And I'm all for peace on earth. But you know what's on earth also? Every person sitting in this room and all of you sitting at home or wherever you are right now. So if we want peace on earth, we must first find peace within ourselves. Crave COVID to be over. Of course. We all would love COVID to be over. But it's not. So, like every other form of suffering that exists, what role do we play in all of that? I couldn't even tell you, I wasn't going to say this, but I couldn't even tell you how many people still say to me, like, why are you wearing a mask when you're leading? Why? Because I don't want to get sick, and if I'm sick, I don't want to get you sick. That's it. It's really simple. So if we want COVID to be over, what are we doing? If we want to end suffering in our lives, what are we doing?
Suffer.
Huh?
Suffer.
Well, I know we're suffering. I'm just saying it was more of a rhetorical, like, what can we do? If we want to end suffering, how do we end it? If we want to end COVID in our own lives, what can we do? If we want to have healthier relationships with people, what can we do? If we want to get less annoyed at the person on the freeway, what can we do? All of these things we have a role in. Now, the reality is, so do lots of other people. So we cannot control what anybody else does. All we can control is what we do. Some semblance of normalcy. There is no normal. There never was. The normal that was before, people were still miserable. But somehow we take events like this, like a pandemic, and we say we want things to go back to normal. It was different, of course, but there were no lack of people showing up to Buddhist meditation stuff to deal with problems in their life pre-pandemic. There were no lack of people in therapy pre-pandemic. There were no lack of people miserable and suffering pre-pandemic. So while the pandemic has added a whole level of complexity, an additional level of stresses and chaos and pressures, absolutely. But they were all there before. They were just different. And you're tired. Sleep more. Simplify things. One of my favorite Zen expressions is when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. It was so funny the other day. I was hungry. And so I had something to eat. And then I got tired. So I took a nap. And without thinking about that expression or quote that I have shared for years, all of a sudden afterwards I was like, wow, I was hungry. I ate. I was tired. I slept. That's it. Simplify things. Our brains, our thoughts can get exhausting. And dealing, Cynthia, with all these things you mentioned, the world not being at peace, COVID not being over, life pre-COVID not existing, these things will make you exhausted. Not just experiencing it, but your mind constantly focused on it over and over and over again is exhausting. So work on coming back to breath, work on coming back to present moment. Here I am, I'm sitting, I'm breathing. What can I do now to make sure I am at peace and share that with others? That's it. Other thoughts or questions?
have something to ask about the sources of suffering
Mm.
and how to deal with them.
Mm.
And as far as I can recollect from past couple of sessions that I attended, greed, anger, arrogance, these are the three primal causes. Other than that, we suffer our memories, our emotions, and we relive. We don't stay present. These are the things that we can work out whilst staying present, focusing on breath. But there is other source of suffering that becomes like a burden at times, which is expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And even in expectations, there are expectations that you have, which you can manage and run to deal with. But there is another burden that people have expectation which you cannot fulfill.
Which you cannot what?
Which you cannot fulfill.
Oh, so people have expectations of you that you cannot fulfill. Right.
So how to deal with that?
Huh.
That you
Yes.
cannot fulfill? Many times people can expect a lot from you. And you
Yes.
can't overcome it.
Yes. Do you expect me to answer that?
Yes. I would like an insight.
Why?
I would like to know.
You want to know? That's awful greedy of you.
Oh, yeah.
So let me just repeat the question for those online here that maybe didn't hear it. So, and I'll paraphrase it, but correct me if I'm completely off base. What you've learned recently from the last few sessions: the cause, source of our suffering, the three poisons: greed, anger, ignorance. You found additional sources of suffering, which is also expectations that you may have of, you didn't say this, but either of yourself or others, or sometimes both, right? And then the question is, but what about other people's expectations of you that you can maybe not fulfill, and the burden and the pressure that you feel because of that? That's your question? Yeah. My master years ago taught me to never expect anything from anyone, ever. Greatest teaching. The first thing is to practice removing your expectations of others. Because there's a couple levels to this, but if you are going to have expectations of others, which you do, we all do, right? Then it's only fair that others should have expectations of you, right? Yes? You might not like them, right? Just like people don't like you having expectations of them. That's why my first response to you was, you expect me to answer that. You have created a condition in your head that says, once you ask a question or share a thought, you expect me to answer. What if I just ignored you and went over here to the next question? How would you feel? Suffering, right? So I'm trying to first come at it from the point, because what I heard in your question is recognizing all of the things you listed, the cause of suffering, the expectations you have. But what I'm hearing in your question is more the burden you're feeling from others expecting things of you. That's the bigger part right now, right? So what I'm saying is, the first thing is to recognize that as long as you are alive and having expectations of others, which we all do, that means others are going to have expectations of you. First, accept and embrace the fact that that's never going to change. Can you do that? They're always going to expect things of you. Do you realize that?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Now, the second thing to do is to recognize that's their mess, not yours. Their expectations of you have nothing to do with you. How fair is it for you to expect things from other people? why do we feel we deserve anything, that we are entitled to anything? Them expecting things of you is their mess, not yours. And there's a lot of Buddhist teachings here, but non-attachment being one of them, right? Not attaching to this idea that you have to live up to other people's expectations of you. That's a heavy burden. Could be parents, could be relationship partners, right? Whoever it may be. Could be the person at the checkout counter in a grocery store, right? I mean, they expect you to pay. How wrong is that? Right? Now, I want to add here, just for anyone who maybe is new or hasn't sat with me before, I'm not suggesting that in relationships with family or relationship partners, that there isn't a mutual understanding of how we want this relationship to go. I'm not suggesting that, if you're in a relationship or a dynamic with somebody and they're just treating you like crap, that you just say, well, I don't expect anything from you, so you can just continue to treat me like crap. That's not what I'm suggesting. There's a point in our lives where we can say, I want to remove myself from this dynamic, if we choose to. But expecting people to be a certain way, just because of some dynamic or situation that's created, it's not healthy. So their expectations of you, they're not in your head, right? I mean, I can relate to this so personally from growing up and all the pressure I put on myself to be the best, to win, to succeed, to excel, because all the pressure and expectations I felt that were put on me by loved ones, And then I realized that I was killing myself to try to make other people happy. And I was miserable. And once I realized, hey, I have to do what is right for me and not attach to the story that I'm telling myself that this is this person and they have this expectation of me and I must fulfill that as if it's some, obligation. You have to live your life and be at peace with the choices you make. And others can choose to be okay with that and embrace that or not. But that's, like I said, their mess, their story, their attachments. Right? That makes sense?
Yes,
It's not easy.
to an extent, yeah. But when you see someone else suffering and you feel that part of it is because you're responsible for it. So I understand it's like detachment. You have to understand it's their process of evolution.
Yes.
And you're not a part of it.
And that's what I'm saying, again, without getting into specifics, because that always makes things somewhat seemingly easy, but actually worse for me, because I don't want to turn it into like a therapy type thing. I'm trying to keep this very broad and general. We have to understand that if we're in a relationship, as an example, and they are expecting things from us and we're not able to fulfill that, then maybe that dynamic should cease to exist. Because then we're in a situation where both people are miserable. I'm miserable trying to live a life that they want me to live. And they're miserable because they want me to live a life that they want me to live. And neither one of us is happy. That's insane. And unfortunately, that's how most people spend their lives. To me, courage, bravery, is to be honest with the dynamic in any relationship. Right? Otherwise, very often people just get stuck living a lie. year after year after year. And that doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, for what? So, heavy stuff and very real, I can tell. But yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, for sure. Anything else before we close? Final thought or anything? I think the last thing I'll say on that note is just that, and this is where, especially if you're new to Buddhist practice, it can be really challenging because it presents this opportunity to just be really honest with yourself. And then to be able to share that honesty with others. That's really difficult to do. Super difficult. But I think we, talk about obligation. I feel that we have an obligation to be true to ourselves. Right? And I don't mean at the expense of making life miserable for somebody else. But at least being honest about where we are in our lives and how we engage and interact with people is important. Yeah. All right, so we'll join palms, we'll close on that. And the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all those who've lost lives during this pandemic, their family and friends who continue to suffer, to all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas who suffer at this time, and to the children, teachers, adults that lost lives in Texas recently. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns, we're not gurus or masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. A couple things that are back. The Day of Silence is back. It's already filled up for June, which will be this coming weekend. But it's a 4-hour silent retreat. So first Saturday of the month, starts at 8 a.m. It's 25-minute sits basically that repeat from 8 to noon. So if 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, then I strongly suggest you do it for 4 hours. It makes 20 minutes seem that much easier afterwards. So that's a great experience. You can RSVP. That's also free. It's on the website. And the Family Sangha has returned. That's a beautiful group. Also, can check the website for that. So they're meeting once a month over the summer and then should be twice a month in the fall. But thanks all for being here. Please be safe, be kind. Good luck with everything. Life is hard enough as it is right now. So try to be kind to yourself and everybody you encounter. So thanks all.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.